Hello and welcome back to the Spicy Pisces podcast. I'm your host, Emma Jepson, and I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for joining me today. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about my relationship with movement, how it's evolved over time, what it looks like today, how I've healed the way I look at exercise and fitness and movement and all those terms. And like many of us, my relationship with exercise has been a very complicated one and very tricky to navigate as well, trying to unlearn all these toxic beliefs diet culture teaches us about exercise just being a way to burn off calories or to earn calories or to manipulate the way you look to try to fit some body trend or body ideal, whatever it might be. But I feel like I'm finally in such a good place with my relationship with movement and exercise and the way I look at it, and I have more of an intuitive approach today, while still having some sort of structure to work on certain goals that I have, not in a physical sense, but more so in how I feel. So a goal for me is to be a little bit more flexible since I am working more office jobs now, internships, and also in school. I'm sitting a lot more, so making sure I'm still moving my body in a way that feels good and loosens me up and allows me to sleep better at night, so I'm not really stressed out and holding on to all this tension. I'm able to release it before I go to bed, so I have an easier time sleeping and I get better sleep as well. Also, lifting a little bit more so that I'm stronger as I age, being able to carry groceries back to my apartment upstairs, carrying kids around, carrying their things as well, and also having an easier time bouncing back if I do roll an ankle or break a bone. I have an easier time bouncing back and recovering so that I can get back to other things going on in my life. A third goal is just simply to benefit my mental health. I've found that in the past, when I've completely stopped moving my body in any type of way or form, whether it be walking or lifting or anything like that, if I've taken any breaks for a very long period of time unintentionally because my life got busy in other areas or I wasn't able to make time for it, I've noticed that my mental health has been impacted very adversely, and I've struggled during some periods because I wasn't making time for movement, even if it was simply a 10-minute walk, a 20-minute yoga session, following a YouTube video, going on a walk just to pick up food from somewhere, like those types of little, it doesn't even need to be a full-on workout in the gym, just little movements like that. Now I'm making sure that I'm engaging in activities several times a week that feel good to me, and going back to the whole intuitive aspect. If I'm feeling like I do want to lift a certain day, then I'll go and lift. But if that sounds horrendous and like all I can do on that certain day is just do a short walk on a treadmill while watching a podcast or YouTube video, then that's what I'll do. But I'm not going to force myself to do any movement that I'm not in the mood for and that my body's not up for, simply because I think it's going to burn the most calories or help me achieve these goals to look a certain way, which I'm going to talk about this a little bit later once I kind of go through my history of my journey with exercise. But in the past, I've had to hit really specific goals. So, for example, being able to run a mile under 7 minutes and 45 seconds, or doing sprints across the field in X amount of time, or lifting this amount of weight, or something like that, because it's going to determine how qualified I am to make a certain level of sports team or something like that. So I'll talk about how I've dealt with that in the past and how I manage that as well, and the stress that kind of comes with that, and the whole concept of pushing yourself and maybe pushing yourself a little too far to the point where it's unhealthy, and how I navigated that. But now I don't set any goals for myself in that sense, where I know I'm going to get insanely competitive with myself and push my body too far into the point where it's not fun anymore and I don't feel like I'm actually enjoying the movement I'm doing. I make sure it's in a way that when I'm pushing myself, it's fun and it feels good, but it doesn't feel too hard to the point where I'm almost abusing my body and what it's capable of doing. And it's more so as a punishment. It's supposed to be enjoyable. And that's how I approach it now. So when I wake up, I ask myself, what's going to be the most enjoyable form of movement today? And if that's absolutely demolishing my legs in like a squat and deadlift workout, then that's what I'm going to do. But if it's just walking around the city that I go to school in or walking past the river, then that's what I'll do. But I don't make it too complicated. I listen to my body, and I make sure to not see it as a punishment. I see it something that's supposed to be fun to engage in. So now diving into my whole journey of my relationship with exercise. Growing up, I always played sports. My parents put me and my siblings in literally every sport imaginable that my town and neighboring towns offered. I tried like tennis, badminton, I think, for a while, rugby, softball, gymnastics, soccer, lacrosse, field hockey later on. I did dance for a brief period, basketball, flag football, so many sports, but I always genuinely loved playing sports and being active and moving my body, and I found it to be so much fun, and I never ever thought of it as a form of punishment growing up as a kid. It was just purely fun for me, and so that's also something I've been trying to channel now and moving my body in fun ways that I maybe wouldn't have thought of otherwise, because I always thought it had to be a super intense gym workout where I was dripping sweat afterwards and I had burned a certain amount of calories and I felt accomplished afterwards, and like I had then earned the right to go out to dinner with friends and eat some food that I wouldn't know the amount of calories in or that I didn't make myself, or I felt like this had burned off this snack that I had earlier that day when I was at school and someone brought in a certain food and I felt like I had gotten rid of that bad food that I had put in my body and I needed to rid myself of it somehow. And I felt like I had done a good thing by, excessively working out, even if my body was telling me to stop and I was not having fun and I was so miserable. It does not need to look like that. And exercise is so much more than simply a punishment, which I finally learned, and I'll talk about a little bit later. The next part of my history of my relationship with exercise would probably be entering high school. This is when I started playing field hockey in 6th grade, and I joined a club team at the time that my older sister was on, because my town didn't offer a league of field hockey until you started 8th grade. So I had a few years till then, but I started club and I played consistently up until COVID hit my spring of my junior year of high school. And so when my high school season had started, that was 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, and then I would have club practices on Sunday and then sometimes even on Saturdays as well. So I was playing at least 7 days a week. And also and that was on only during the fall season when the high school league was going on, and then off season I'd have practices for club maybe 2 to 3 times a week, and then I was also scheduling in other workouts to keep myself on quote unquote on track to maintain the fitness level I was in when the next preseason came around. And so I never really had to think about scheduling movement into my schedule. It was always kind of just put in there with the practice, and I knew I'd show up and the coaches would have something planned, whether it was focused on running that day or track workout or maybe on more so skills and stick work that day. I never had to think about what I was doing or put much effort into thinking about the workout I wanted to do or how I would structure it. I would just simply show up and listen to the directions the coaches gave us and do it with the rest of my teammates. And I knew that every day after school in the fall season, I would go drive over to our field after class ended, show up for 2 hours, do what I needed to do, and then go back home, do homework, and eat. I was sort of on this schedule that was already determined for me, and I didn't have to think much about anything, and that was a lot easier because it was already built in for you. But now that I'm in college and I'm not playing sports anymore on a team like this, and no one's telling me what to do, that's something that was really hard for me to navigate the first few years of college, and figuring out what workouts I actually genuinely enjoy doing and what makes me feel best and how much of whatever I'm doing makes me feel best, and trying to figure out also when's the best time to do something with my schedule, trying to factor it in with so many other things going on in my life at this time. It's just been really hard to find structure with it. And now at this point, knowing I do need to add it in somewhere, somehow, into my schedule, trying to navigate that. But in high school, it was never really that big of an issue because, again, I just knew that I would show up somewhere and then I'd be moving my body for that period. And as nice as it was not having to think too much about movement and having other people telling me what to do and just showing up and knowing that I'd be moving my body for this set period of time. A downside to that is I was never really able to figure out what works for me specifically. And I always had goals I had to keep working towards, and not goals that I personally developed for myself, but that other people had set. So being able to run a mile in a certain amount of time and whatever it might have been that the coaches told us that we needed to strive for. And this did keep me motivated to keep moving my body because I wanted to get to this point. So I set these little milestones for myself where I'd keep hitting all these benchmarks so that I could hit this big end goal. And that was nice and it helped me stay on track. But the downside to this is that it becomes very controlling then and very compulsive. At least for me it did, and I feel like for a lot of other people this does happen with exercise, where you forget about it being fun and being something that celebrates what your body is able to do, and you see it more so as something you need to do and you don't get to do, and you're able to do. It's more so you have to, and it's not fun, and you do it to appease someone else's wishes and what they want you to be able to do. And I do get the whole concept of like they need you to be in quote unquote in shape to play on a certain team, and they expect a certain level of you if you want to make JV or varsity or whatever team it might be that you're striving towards. I do understand that, but for me it got really controlling, and to the point where I would force myself to go downstairs on our treadmill and run even after practice and run in for 30 minutes or 3 miles or something, and it needed to be in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, I would have been really mad at myself. Or I needed to get in a little lifting workout post literally like after a game or something like that. And this was also at the point, so freshman year was totally fine. My relationship with exercise was relatively healthy then. I was feeling myself properly for all the movement I was doing, especially during when my high school season was going on, because I was moving my body a decent amount, 7 days a week. My sophomore year of high school is when my ED kicked in, and that's when it got more negative, and that's when I started seeing exercise as something that I could use as a way to burn off calories and compensate for eating something earlier that day or that week that I, at the time, deemed as unhealthy and I felt guilty about consuming. And I started watching a lot more What I Eat in a Day videos. I got thrown down all of these rabbit holes on YouTube and Instagram of the whole diet culture videos and exercise videos of you doing these certain ab workouts to cinch your waist or lose the stubborn lower belly fat or lose fat in the specific area, which now I know you can't just pinpoint fat loss. Like, it's not, everyone just holds fat in different areas in their body, and that's just like a genetic thing that you can't really change, obviously, unless you get like plastic surgery. But I don't think that you need to fuss if you don't naturally have a flatter stomach. Like, some people just genetically don't hold fat and weight in that area, and then some people do. But it's the whole concept of body diversity, and you don't need to, just because you don't look like someone else in the specific video, like, these workouts aren't going to make you look like them, because even if we all did the same workouts, we would still look totally different, because body diversity, genetics, so widely, vastly different. And two, just because you don't look like this other person doesn't mean you need to try to change the way you look to look like them by using exercise as a way to manipulate the way you look. Like, you don't need to do that. But at this time, I was a sophomore and junior in high school, and I was very impressionable, and I also didn't have proper coping skills, and I didn't know how to acknowledge my emotions and feelings popping up from stress of school, taking more AP classes, wanting to impress my coaches by looking like I was in shape and I had a certain physique, thinking of getting recruited by college coaches and wanting to fit this certain body standard that they expected of me and fitness level that they expected me to have. And the male gaze started impacting me at this age. Friends, my relationship with food took a downturn, so that took a huge hit. On my relationship with exercise as well, when I started getting introduced to more of this diet culture content and what it promotes. And I think generally I just didn't feel confident in myself, and I didn't love the way I looked, the way I acted, my behaviors, my personality. You're kind of at that age where you hate everything about yourself, and I was just looking for something to make me feel good about myself. And so when I started getting introduced to diet culture and everything it promotes, it gave me this almost superiority complex where I felt better than other people because I had willpower and I had strength and I was doing something morally good for me that other people weren't able to do because it was so hard to maintain, but I was strong enough to do it. And so other people would praise me and admire the behaviors I was doing and how disciplined I was in my schedule and my eating habits, my exercise routine, all of that. And that just feeds your drive to continue with it, which I've had to unlearn as well, seeking that validation from other people and now just focusing on what I want to do and what works for me, irregardless of what other people have to say. And so I fell into this really unhealthy spiral of forcing myself to work out almost every day and following the strict schedule of running with a mix of some HIIT and light lifting in order to maintain a certain physique that people would keep complimenting me about and that other people kept seeing as something that was an indication of being a strong, competitive, solid player that they wanted to see start on the field and that guys would find attractive and desirable and that I could go to a mall and fit into clothes that I tried on at the store and feel confident about trying them on in the fitting rooms at the mall with the horrible lighting that they have and the mirrors that are horrendous and feeling okay with that. And in a body too where, friends and certain family members weren't making comments about the way I looked in a negative way and now they became positive, and that was really a turning point as well. Because then I thought I was doing something really good because these people had stopped criticizing me and were now complimenting me on the same topic. And at this point, I was simply working out because I felt like I had to in order to maintain this certain physique that I felt more confident in at the time and that other people were recognizing. And this is another topic we can talk about too, but the difference in how people treat you based on the way you look and specifically relating to body shape and body size, I saw that I was getting different attention from people and more so positive attention. And so that fueled my desire to keep going. And I remember after my junior year field hockey season, I just felt so incredibly burned out. This was also when my eating disorder became the worst and took the greatest toll on me. This is the lowest weight I'd been, and I had lost my period at this point for over a year. I had lost, because then leading up to that preseason going into junior year, I had been lifting as well, so I had muscle on me, but I was just incredibly lean. But then once the season started, I didn't have as much time to lift, and it was a lot more running, and I was still not eating enough to properly feel all the activity I was doing. And I had dropped all of the muscle mass, and I was just so lean, and I looked like a totally different person, unrecognizable when I look back at photos now. And I talk more about this in the second episode that I published that I can link in the description of this episode as well. It's the first part of my story with food and body. The second episode will be coming out sometime soon. I'm still trying to figure out how much and what I want to include in it since there's a lot we could talk about and I don't want to throw too much in there and make it like an hour and a half episode again. But I will link that one in the description if you want to learn more about my ED at that point in my life and how it developed and evolved and what it looked like when I took my first steps of my recovery journey, my junior year of high school. But after my season that year, I just felt so tired of everything and I just felt like I couldn't keep up with this and I couldn't do this anymore and maintain this level of exercise and commitment to moving my body this frequently and the way I was eating. I was just so done and I knew that this wasn't sustainable anymore. And the way I ate also had a huge impact on what movement I was able to partake in and to what level. And my eating habits at the time is what led to the burnout as well. And the new mindset I had around fitness and eating from all the diet culture content I was consuming that made me overdo it and not recognize that I needed to feel myself properly as well and take care of myself to be able to engage in this intense level of movement and exercise. And so I actually got really lucky when COVID hit my spring of my junior year of high school because all sports were pretty much canceled. I stopped going to my club practices on the off season, and my preseason then going into my senior year of high school was kind of up in the air because we didn't know what it would look like. COVID was still going to be around when school started in September, what the deal was going to be. So I felt like for the first time in so many years, I was able to just take a breather and pause and not feel like I was constantly rushing and doing so many things and doing things not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. And I didn't have any set goals then at this point on my fitness journey. And I was able to take a step back, and I think I completely stopped working out then for a few weeks. So I would go on walks with my family, but I stopped running as much, as intensely. I stopped lifting as much, and I just listened to my body. And this was also when I started my recovery journey with food as well. I took a step back from being so intense with both food and exercise, and I tried to take a more intuitive approach, and I could sense that my body was just so tired and burned out, and what I really needed was just to let it rest and do more gentle forms of movement. So again, like walks, I did some yoga. It felt really nice. It was a nice break, and I really needed it, and I'm glad I was able to really take a step back from focusing so much on school and sports and other things, and everything was pretty much just put on pause for a few months. And it was nice to have so much time to simply focus on my relationship with food and exercise and checking in with myself and having the time to sit down and reflect on how I wanted my relationship with food, my body, and exercise to progress and what next steps I needed to take to get to that point. So then senior year started. The entirety of the rest of my junior year was online. Then we went back in person for a few days a week my senior year, and I think it was relatively okay for most of senior year because I was only in person like 2 days a week, but then we'd have COVID breakouts, and then they'd just send everyone home online for 2 weeks, and then you'd go back for another week, and then the same thing would happen. So didn't even really have much of a field hockey season either. I did hurt my ankle going into the season, so I wasn't able to be that active on the team, but also our season was only 4 weeks total because there kept being breakouts amongst the athletes. It was just a rough season, but I didn't really prep too much for it because I knew it probably wouldn't be like a full season. It'd probably be cut short, which is exactly what ended up happening. So I think the next portion of this journey, though, would be the end of my senior year when prom occurred and also prom house. And so first discussing prom, I was pretty self-conscious about trying on dresses just because I feel like a lot of them are made for people that are at least 5'8" and have a naturally slimmer build, which I'm only 5'3", and your girl's got hips and, I have like curves and stuff, so I didn't like the way it fit. And a lot of these dresses, when I felt like they were made for a body type that was totally vastly different from the one that I had. And I ended up finding one I really liked. I love the color, but I just needed to get it tailored to fit like the waist and then my arms and stuff like that. So that was fine. I ended up really liking it, but then I was also self-conscious though because I saw a lot of other girls at prom had on more bodycon and slim fitting styles, and they looked really good in them, but I was almost self-conscious and a little jealous because I wasn't able to pull off a shape like that just because I didn't feel confident in wearing tighter fitting clothing because I didn't have a perfectly flat stomach, or my hip dips would show, or my butt looked a little weird, or it didn't look like that perfect hourglass figure. And so I did like the look I ended up going in, but I was still a little, I guess I was comparing the way I looked to these other girls and wishing that I could pull off a look like that and look like them. And I still had the whole sense of self-consciousness and not loving the way my body looked. And before I talk about the prom house experience, I did forget to add this in earlier, but I didn't excessively work out before prom to try to fit into a smaller size. And I know this is the case with weddings a lot of the time. Women will just go on these crazy diets before because they want to look super small and skinny in the photos that they take, and they want to have the smallest dress size possible. And I'm only 21 and I don't intend to get married for a few more years at least, so I can't speak upon this experience firsthand, but I know from cousins and other people I've spoken to, that's the whole case. And I feel like it's kind of similar with prom too, where I know some other people did start restricting before because they wanted to feel thin going into it, and they wanted to fit into certain dress sizes or dress shapes, so they started cutting back on food or working out more excessively, which I'm surprised they didn't actually do anything crazy like that. I guess only because I had in the past, earlier on in recovery, anytime I had a moment where I didn't like the way it looked in something, or I ate something and I felt shitty, I would still occasionally have those moments where I'd go back and revert to my old habits of restricting and excessively working out. But leading up to prom and prom house, I didn't do any crazy movement. I didn't try to go back and lose more weight because I think I knew I'd already gotten so far on my recovery journey that I couldn't just throw it all out the door. Like, I loved the direction I was going in, and this was an experience that was going to make me uncomfortable, but I would embrace it no matter what feelings arose, no matter how uncomfortable I felt. And so then leading into prom house, for anyone that doesn't live in New Jersey, anyone state who does not do this, or even if you do live in Jersey and you've never heard of this before, prom house is essentially where after prom, you go down to the Jersey Shore and you rent out a house with a bunch of your other friends. Mine had like 30 to 40 people, and you all just basically party for a few days after prom, and then you go back to school the next week. And I was pretty self-conscious going in, and when I was packing my clothes for this too, because my sister had done it 2 years before me, and also just looking at the name of it and what it entails, a lot of people are just wearing bathing suits the whole time or minimal clothing and showing a lot of skin. And I pulled out some bathing suits that I felt pretty good in, but I was still self-conscious about being around guys as well. A lot of people went in with the goal of just hooking up with people, and my main goal was just to simply have fun. I didn't necessarily go in with that intent as well, but it's hard not to adopt that mindset, I guess, if everyone else is constantly talking about other people and if they look good enough, or if this person's looking at them, or how that, like, just you're constantly thinking about other people's appearances and stuff like that. And it was hard to go, and I kept comparing myself to the way I looked to other people when we were laying out on the beach, and it was a really difficult experience, but I am glad I went through it because it was a big step in my recovery journey, and being able to go out there amongst all my peers and wear a bikini and feel a little self-conscious in it, but still doing it and pushing through the discomfort, and knowing that everyone else is probably feeling so uncomfortable as well and so self-conscious about the way they look, and I don't need to just get so caught up in my head. And I can just focus on having fun and having a good time and making memories before I graduate from high school. Now, leading into my first semester of college, I actually studied abroad for my first semester. My school has this program where they send a third of the incoming undergraduate class abroad somewhere. So I was studying in Rome, Italy. And when I got there, I wasn't prepared for how much walking I'd be doing, and I guess I live in a suburb back home, so I'm used to driving to a lot of places, but I was walking pretty much everywhere. All of the sightseeing, when you're out at night, walking to all the different bars, and I wasn't really doing any other exercise at the time. We did have a gym in the apartment complex that all of the students and I lived in, and I'd go down occasionally to stretch and stuff, but I wasn't really, besides walking, I wasn't really doing anything else. I did notice that some of my clothes started becoming a little bit bigger on me and started fitting a little bit more loosely over me. And when I went shopping, I started fitting into smaller sizes, but it was unintentional because I didn't even realize this was happening. It's not like I was purposely exercising to lose weight. It kind of just happened. And I was still eating properly, and I started eating a little bit more at one point because I was getting a little nervous again because I was losing weight again. Like, that kind of brought back the traumatic experience I had previously with my ED. So I started eating a little bit more, but part of me was also okay with it happening, and I also felt like I didn't need to work out and add in more routine exercise besides walking a lot because I was losing weight. And at the time, that was still my main intention with exercise. It was to change the way I looked. It didn't serve any other purpose than manipulating the way my body looked and trying to become as thin as possible. And I was also pretty anxious this semester, one, because it was my first time moving away from home for a very long period of time. And then two, I was also moving to a completely new continent across an ocean, which I was terrified about going into it. I ended up having a really great time, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to study abroad when I did, but I think I was really anxious, and in the past, movement has been something that has allowed me to stay somewhat less anxious. Like, I'm able to have some sort of consistency, and it just releases a lot of the tension for me no matter what I do. I just find, even if it's 10 minutes of something, I just feel a lot better afterwards. So I didn't think about even going down to the gym for 20 minutes a day just to stretch because I didn't associate exercise with being something I could use to help me mentally at the time. I didn't think I needed to go because the main goal was already being accomplished of being smaller. So I was like, I don't need to do this now because I've already found something that's working to help me fit into smaller sizes and lose weight, even though I was still struggling mentally this semester, and having more consistent forms of movement probably would have helped me looking back. Then the next part of this journey is I came back home for winter break, and then I started back at the main campus that spring semester. I noticed I started gaining a little bit of weight just from the dining hall and going out to eat with friends. I go to school in a city, so there were so many fun restaurants to try, so many fun pop-up shops and cool, fun, little, mochi nuts and boba and all those fun places that I've never tried before because I didn't grow up in a city. So I noticed that I was gaining some weight, also because I wasn't walking nearly as much as I was the previous semester just because classes were so much harder, and I was in the library more often than just walking around exploring. So I noticed that my body did change, and I got pretty self-conscious about that, so I started being more committed to working out then, because I'm like, the main purpose it serves is to change the way we look, and because I'm not happy with the way I look, I need to start it up again and become more intense with it to change the way I look, to be happy about it again. And I would go with my friends sometimes. We do a lifting session, or I'd walk around and listen to a podcast, or maybe go on a run with a friend. So it was still somewhat enjoyable, but it wasn't for the right reasons. And I still found myself beating myself up because I wasn't as quote-unquote athletic as I was back in high school when I was 16, 17 years old, running 7 days a week. And at this point now in college, I put on some weight, and I didn't need to be that active, but I was still comparing myself to that time in my life, and I didn't like how far, everyone always uses this term, but quote-unquote, falling off the wagon. I hadn't been that active for over a year or two, so obviously I'm not going to be able to just hop back into it like I did in high school, but I wasn't able to fully accept that at the time, and I still felt really shitty about the way it looked and my relationship with exercise. Although it was fun sometimes when I'd go with friends, I still hated doing it, and I had more of a desire to do it because I felt like I needed to, not because I wanted to, and I actually found it good just for my mental health. It was more like I had to revert back to the way I looked when I was younger, and that previous semester as well, when I was studying abroad, and also getting back into that same shape and condition I was in high school when I really didn't need to because I wasn't playing sports like I was back then. So after that spring semester, I came back home I had a really long summer break, 3 months, so I started going to a gym nearby my home, and I don't know, because my brother was also lifting a lot more at this time, but I started getting more into heavy lifting rather than, I kind of stepped away from cardio for a bit, which I was glad I did, because that was a pretty toxic relationship too, so I focused more on strength, which I was happy about, but I noticed that because I was lifting heavier, I was so much hungrier, so I was eating a lot more food, which was good because I was putting on muscle and my body I was feeling myself properly, but I noticed that I got a little bit, I guess I'm going to say bulkier and more, my clothes started fitting me. They felt tighter, but not because I was putting on necessarily, at the time I thought bad weight, but because I was putting on more muscle, but I still felt uncomfortable about, even though I was losing fat, I still felt uncomfortable because my clothing size was going up a little bit more because the booty was getting bigger, the shoulders were getting broader. I didn't like that. And I guess it was also toxic because I fell into the macro side of TikTok where they almost make counting calories and all this seem, it's like this positive side of it, even though I think, in my personal opinion, you don't need to be tracking anything because it's just so mentally draining. And you have this whole control issue with food then. I don't do any of that anymore, but I kind of fell into this side of, when I started going on TikTok more that summer, the macro side and like lifting and, working out and properly feeling yourself. I was like, oh, this is a good way to approach nutrition and lifting that, I can still change the way I look to be happy in the way I look again, but I don't need to completely revert back to counting calories and restricting like I did before. It was like this middle ground, even though it still wasn't healthy for me. But at the time, that's what I was doing. But I didn't like how much bigger I was getting because at the time I still internalized working out is meant to make you smaller, and I didn't like how it was having the opposite effect this time around. So then I kind of stopped because then I was also working at a local like smoothie juice place near my home, so I was working there and the hours got a little bit busier, so I stopped going to the gym as frequently, and whenever I did go, I kind of pulled back from lifting as much because I wanted to revert back to not being as bulky, so I'd do a little bit more walking and lighter lifting. And then leading into that fall semester then, my goal was to stay somewhat consistent in the gym, but I just joined way too many clubs that semester, and also I was dealing with like roommate and friend issues at the time and trying to look for an internship, and classes were really hard, so a lot was going on mentally and I just had a really hard time balancing everything, and I didn't step foot in the gym at our campus or do any form of movement for the first 2.5 months, and I could definitely, now looking back, mentally I was not in a good spot, and this was a little bit different. I knew I wanted to go to the gym or do something to change the way I looked, but I just kind of lacked motivation this semester, and I don't want to say I was depressed because I know that that's a real, like, mental health issue, and I don't want to just throw it around casually, but I was definitely going through something, and I didn't have this motivation to go to the gym and even do it for a mental relief. It was so hard to like make time for it. Also because I was so busy and I felt like other things took precedence that semester over my movement schedule. And so sometime in November or late October, I was talking to one of my friends, I think, and saying how I wanted to get back into some sort of movement, but I didn't want to go to our campus gym. Also because there's just so many people, and like, for the amount of people that go to our school, they need to make another same gym of that size that they have because it's so hard to wait for machines and the free weights and treadmills. It's not an enjoyable experience going there either, which is also why I kind of stopped going. But one of my friends told me about the cycling studio near our campus, and so I tried it out with her and a few of our other friends for the first class, and I actually really loved it. And so I bought like a monthly pass and I started going like twice a week, and then more like 3-4 times a week once I built up more stamina and strength, because it was really hard. I didn't realize how hard cycling is, but I really loved it because the music was fun. the specific studio, it's called Rev'd. If anyone's in the Boston area, or greater Massachusetts area, totally check out one of their studios if there's one near you. It's a very inclusive environment, and I love all the instructors so much. So I started going there, and I did feel a little bit better mentally. I had a better grip on my sleep schedule, and overall I just felt so much better about myself. And waking up, I felt better going about my day, more motivated to do other things. And so that was really great to see that I was feeling better. I then started my first 6-month-long internship that spring semester. So my school has this thing where you take a break from classes and you basically go work somewhere for 6 months. So this is my first cycle of doing this during my time at college. So I was working a 9 to 5, and I didn't have time to go to the earlier classes or midday classes that they ran at the studio. So I started going to the ones that they had at like 6:30, 7:30 after work hours. And because I was sitting so much more during the day, during classes, I would still sit down quite frequently when I was studying, but I was still walking to class, like walking around campus and everything. But now I was just sitting at a desk pretty much all day, just working on Excel. And I noticed that I had more back issues, and like my lower back specifically. And when I did these cycling classes, then I felt like it felt more like, it felt like a lot of strain on my body. And also because this was the only thing I was doing. And like my knees were hurting, so it was a lot of stress on my knees and my back and my upper back and neck as well. It just didn't feel as good as it did before that previous semester. So I decided I'd probably take a step back from going to this many classes per week as I was going to, and I would try to add in some other form of movement to kind of balance it out. And then I realized I probably needed to strength, because I hadn't worked out most of that fall semester. So I needed to get back to the basics of like just lifting a little lightly, stretching, strengthening my hips, my core from sitting all day as well, to make sure I had better posture when I was sitting at my desk and looking at my monitor all day. A lot of the people on my team are also older than I was, and so I would talk to them about movement and stuff and just like their life as well. And I don't know exactly when this happened, but there was like a switch in my brain, and I, instead of looking at movement as a way to get smaller, even though I like thought I wasn't thinking like that anymore previously, I still was internalizing it. I feel like at this point I finally let that go, and I was able to focus on movement being a way to strengthen my body, to make other things easier. So less back pain, neck issues, being able to lift the heavy boxes at the office, carry my groceries back to my apartment, move things into my new apartment up the stairs in our old brownstone building, being able to run, catch the train or something like that. Like just basic everyday things. It doesn't need to be for aesthetic purposes. And I started doing more like squats and deadlifts again, and basic shoulder presses and bench presses and TRX pulls and like pull-ups and just stuff like that, and like core exercises. And I felt so much better. Then I had better sleep, and then going into the office, I felt a lot better sitting all day. Like I didn't have as much back pain or issues, and I felt more flexible and still less anxious because I was letting go a lot of the tension I was holding on to from my job and other things going on in my life at the time. It was an outlet for me to let go of all the stress I was holding on to. So overall, I just felt a lot better. And I also felt like I was putting less strain on my body because I wasn't doing as crazy, intense, impactful workouts. And it was more lower impact workouts that were purely a way for me to relieve stress and just feel a little bit stronger. Like I wasn't working towards any huge goals where I needed to be crazy intense with all my workouts. It was purely just to like calm me down instead of making me more stressed out. And so then pretty much since then up until now, so that was basically all of 2023. That's been my same mindset with movement. There were some periods where I wasn't able to be as consistent because other things took precedence over movement, but then other times I was a little bit more consistent with it. And when there are these ebbs and flows, I remind myself that change is okay, and it doesn't always need to look perfect or perfectly consistent. And as long as I'm still checking in with myself and making sure that I'm making time for movement when I feel like I need to have a 20-minute walk or 30 minutes of stretching or something like that, I'm building in time for these periods of movement when I'm able to, so that I'm taking care of my mental health. But it doesn't need to be, 7 days a week for an hour each day. It can look like whatever I want it to look like, different times of the year, different stages of my life, but making sure I'm still making time for it when I feel like I need to. And I also wanted to mention that I've tried getting back into running for the past year, but I've had a really hard time doing so because just my knees are not cooperating and my ankles and my Achilles heel, just because they're so much weaker now because I'm not running as frequently as I used to when I just did it year round because I had to for sports. I stopped for a while and I put on some weight that I needed to gain, and it just became harder to get back into it. And so initially I was beating myself up when I wasn't able to, but then I realized that running just may not be the right exercise for me anymore, and it's really nothing to get mad or frustrated over because there's so many different ways I can move my body, and it's okay if running might not be the right exercise at this point in my life. And our bodies are meant to change and will change our entire life, and so exercise that worked for me when I was a teenager may not work for me now in my new body that I have being 21, and that's okay. Or I might not even enjoy doing the same movement I did back in high school at that age, and that's okay as well, because change is okay. And now to wrap up, I want to share how I used to view exercise and now how I view it today, and making a distinction between the two. So now reflecting on my past behaviors and relationship with exercise, I would say exercise should not be a punishment for eating something, for overeating, for eating something that's a fear food, for making room for calories that you're going to be consuming later in the day. It should not be a punishment for anything to do with food. It should not be a supplement process to change the way you look or manipulate your appearance to achieve some sort of aesthetic goal. And it should not be a way to force your body into one that you love. If you hold this belief that by changing the way you look, you're going to start loving yourself, it's very easy then to develop this obsessive habit of working out, and to the point where you're overexerting your body, which can actually be so much more damaging and unhealthy to your body as you age, even though it might seem like you're doing something good for your body in the present moment. You're allowed to work out and move your body if you do want to, get healthier in that sense, but you can't learn to love yourself by simply just changing your appearance. Self-acceptance and self-love is truly an internal process, and it comes from healing and working on yourself and acknowledging experiences you've had in your past that might be triggering you today or holding you back from accomplishing something that you want to achieve, or a path you want to take, or a goal you have in life. Like working on those things internally and undoing all these wires in your brain and these receptors in the way you think about things that have been from past experiences and other influences in your life, like parents and friends and siblings and other people, and adopting the way they think and doing a lot of unlearning of certain behaviors and habits and then relearning them in a healthier way, or a way that works better for you. And for example, unlearning the behaviors that diet culture promotes and then relearning a way that's healthier for you and works for you, like I've done with my entire exercise journey. Like that's made me happier in who I am and my appearance, and it's like it starts internal and then it flows externally because I'm doing something that makes me feel good from the inside. And so I feel better overall, and then on the outside, like I'll be taking care of myself better because I feel better about myself, if that makes sense. Like because I've chose to find things that work better for me and figuring out what I really want out of my relationship with exercise at this point in my life. And I've done so much unlearning of these behaviors that were making me so miserable. I've just become so much happier with who I am as a person. I'm so much more confident in my beliefs now because I've established my own beliefs from learning all these other ones that were taking up all my mental space with that. And I just feel so much more confident and better about who I am as a person. And overall, I'd say I love myself more and I accept myself so much more than I did even a year ago, and when I was also struggling with all my eating habits, and even when I was smaller and dealing with my ED, I absolutely hated myself still, even though I essentially should have felt better about myself because I fit this ideal of being thin. I still absolutely hated myself and was so miserable. And now I'm weigh so much more than I did then, but I'm the happiest I've ever been, and I love myself so much more than I ever have. And so that just goes to show that, again, you can't hate your body into one that you love, and you shouldn't be using exercise to force yourself to look a certain way. If it's because you don't like yourself, who you are as a person, like that comes from internal work, and you shouldn't be using exercise as a supplemental process to achieve this goal of changing the way you look to feel happier about who you are as a person. And finally, for why I exercise now, it includes to have a healthier heart and to keep me strong in terms of aging. I feel so much more sore now when I sit in a weird position compared to even like 2 years ago. And I feel like I have a lot more tweaks occur, and just making sure I'm staying strong in my joints and my hips and ankles with some light lifting and walking, just so when I age, I'm not having as many injuries and I feel better going about my day. And prioritizing movements that essentially help my body physically work better, or just be better at being a body. And again, like minimizing back pain, being able to carry groceries around, etc. Second, for the endorphins and mental health boost, I feel so much less anxious and antsy when I move my body. I also sleep so much better and my digestion is immensely improved. And I also feel like I have a less foggy brain and I'm able to retain content better from classes, and I'm able to pay more attention in class. And I overall just feel so much happier with my life and other things going on. And if there's any big issue that pops up, I feel like I'm able to approach it and tackle it a little bit better. I get less anxious about things in general. So that's also why I like moving my body now. The third reason is for mindfulness. I feel like movement in general just helps me practice being present, especially when I go on walks with no music or headphones or any stimulation at all. And I'm able to see what's going on around me, get outside, see the sunset, circadian rhythm, regulating all of that. And also this past fall, I went on a lot of walks around Boston, and I was also able to see all the seasons change and the leaves fall from the trees and then the snow fall. And it was really cool to see that because I feel like it really helped ground me and just make me feel a lot more present in my own life. 4 is to have fun and celebrate what my body can do. So working out with friends, going to a fun Rihanna versus Ariana themed spin class and singing my heart out, being able to do a pull-up without any assistance, and just in general, being more grateful for being able-bodied and being able to move my body in such a diverse range of movements, and acknowledging that even if I do something as simple as a walk around the city or a quick yoga workout, like the fact that I am able to do that is incredible, and I love being able to move my body in ways that feel good and appreciate what it's able to do. So that's another reason why I move my body today. And with all of these, the main reason I work out today and my main goal with working out is for it to be additive rather than subtractive. So no more deducting calories, depleting my energy levels, or shrinking my body. When I work out today and move my body, it's only with the purpose of adding to my life, whether it be endorphins, quality time with friends and family, getting outside, helping my mental health and focus, stretching out my legs, strengthening some part of my body. It's only adding to my life now. And I think that should be everyone's goal with movement, and to think of it as something you're actually able to do and get to do rather than something you have to do. This episode is getting to be on the longer end, so I am going to wrap it up here. But if you made it to the end, thank you so much for listening. If you did enjoy today's episode, feel free to leave a rating and a review on the platform that you're listening on. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and your week, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.